We do record. We record.
Watched it after the fact.
Yeah, people watch it after the fact. Appreciate it. And maybe.
I've watched it after the fact before. I've watched it after the fact.
Okay, so we've got a packed meeting today.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Right now. Right now. Yeah.
Okay, we can get started. We've got a packed meeting today.
I think we're good.
Okay, great. So thanks everybody for being here. My name is Heather Shimon, Librarians Assembly Street. Welcome. So today we've got a packed meeting, and Nancy is going to start about titling and to the camera.
Morning, everyone. As you've heard multiple times, and you've gotten many emails about the title and comp study, the listening sessions are coming up, and ours for libraries, museums, and archives is on November 29th from 10 to 11:30 in this room. I have thought the communication about the online versions has been a little confusing, so I want to clear that up. You can sign up for the online version. You don't have to take it at that specific time. You have till December 5th. So if that works into your schedule better, or let's say you also want to go to a different title and comp listening session, and it's just easier to do one online, you can sign up for the second one or whatever online, and as long as you get it done before December 5th, we'll all get the same feedback that we would receive if you were sitting here in person. So I just want to make that clear, because I thought it made it seem like you had to take it at that exact time, and that's not the case. So I encourage people to sign up. I know I've had a lot of people talk about the job family exploration tool that you can find if you go to the website. I will say it's a little confusing because it is original subfamilies from day one before we had any input or anything. And so they've been changing a lot. And when I was playing with it, I'm still looking at the old. It hasn't updated as we've routed drafts and gotten feedback from everybody. So on Monday, so today is the deadline. Any revisions we have get set in stone today for the listening session. So there will be no more changes after today till the listening sessions. We still have tweaks to make, we know that. So your input will be very valuable in helping us make those tweaks. And so sometimes so I should say, the committee has been working with other committees on overlap issues, specifically IT, outreach, education, compliance. We've had short meetings with a bunch of those subcommittees to make sure that we felt one of the groups was covering it. But still, if you have feedback for us or something's not clear, these are meant to be broad categories, so they don't, we've gotten some feedback that there needs to be 10 core categories. We're trying to stay at the very high broad level, so you can look at it as a progression series. So if your job duties change logically and gradually, you don't necessarily have to change job families. But progression is different than promotion, and I just want to be clear about that. That we'll still be posting jobs, you'll still compete for jobs, but if you now take on a certain new duties, where's the career growth? So in a nutshell, I'll be brief, I know you have a full agenda, but we're working on the job families. Then there'll be subfamilies. Then from the subfamilies, I don't have the exact language, but it's coming. There'll be two things, management track and like operational track, for lack of a better word. Then based on each of those tracks, there might be 8 compensation categories for each. Then once you follow that through, then you get to your actual title at the end. And it might be 1 or 2 titles, 3, whatever, depending upon the track. much more complex than we have now. So we'll all be working through this together. It's not like we have the end picture in mind and we're working backwards. Everybody always says, well, what's the more high compensated job subfamily? I don't know. But they will be tracking this to market data, not just market data from campus, but market data from our peers. And very clearly we've been saying, pick the peers correctly, pick the size of schools, so we are truly being compared to our peers. And they seem to have heard that loud and clear. So big thing is the plug to sign up for the listening sessions, but any questions that anybody would like answered before the listening sessions? All right, awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, also I didn't know if anyone didn't see, we've got cookies and coffee and tea and hot water here if you'd like tea and beverages. Okay, so next on the agenda is announcements. Does anyone have? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry.
Okay, and then next. Oh,
Sorry. Partners in Giving, most of you have your packets already. You all know this spiel, but we are looking for people to bake pies. If you didn't see the email yesterday, there's a Google form from that email that you can use to sign up to bake pies for the pie bash.
okay. Partners in Giving, sign up to make pies, use the Google form. Okay, just for the cameras. Yes.
The barrel in the front of the building is only half full. You know, we're collecting here at Memorial for the food drive, so just a reminder, bring some in before the 28th of November.
Great, so bring food in for the food drive, the barrel, and the lobby at Memorial. Thank you, Debbie. Any other announcements? Okay, number 3 on the agenda, new staff. Do you have anyone to announce new staff? Okay. So anyone watching, welcome to new staff. And Michael Cohen here.
He's not in today?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Which thing is he doing?
University library committee. So invented.
Shoot. I can do this. Actually, how about this? If you jump to somebody else and give me like 5 minutes to find the things, I can do the stuff.
So, Amy?
Yeah.
Maybe you were next on the agenda. Yeah, so let's do the Cassie update with Amy, because the academic staff assembly, just to save time for the conversation later, I just linked the meeting notes. So that'll go to these notes here. So if anyone wants to see the meeting notes from academic staff assembly, please go to those links in the agenda. And
So I just have a very brief update because the Cassie, I think it's twice a year, is that correct? Twice a year, this had a brown bag session yesterday. It was the first one that I've attended, so a lot of it was sort of understanding what was going on. But just to point out, the discussion points were about the discretionary compensation fund. They went around and talked about each of the Cassie reps presented how it was happening or being approached in each of the different schools, and they are very different in terms of this promoted transparency and people's different schools or departments' notion of what is transparency. The comment that I offered, and if I was incorrect, well, I guess I will correct that, or someone will correct me here. I basically said at the library we received the email from Ed and that supervisors will be contacted, but because I'm not a supervisor, I have no idea what happened. So that is so much for transparency as far as that's concerned. So that's pretty much what I said about that. They also, then we went around and talked about what was going on. One thing that they mentioned, they gave us some figures, and I guess I'll probably maybe scan this in for the minutes that you could see this. They gave us an academic staff recognition opportunity snapshot of the general library system over the past 5 years, what the participation has been in these campus-wide sort of recognition things. I don't have a feel for how the numbers, how they match for the rest of the campus. I mean, you'll get this, but one thing they did point out was that academic staff would have received an email on November 7th, which I did, and I'm guessing all the academic staff here did, for professional development grants and awards, and there's a deadline of January 12th for the UW-Madison Academic Staff Excellent Awards. And again, I'll add the information to the minutes so that you're all aware of that. That's just sort of an FYI. And they also talked about the job family, which is what was just discussed, and this is about and again, I'll add these links about registering to listening sessions, and they handed out this poster that said, you may attend without loss of pay. So these are, I'm guessing these are the listening sessions, or I'm not exactly sure. It's just something that they handed out. So I'll add that information to the minutes. So.
Thank you, Amy. Does anyone have anything they want to add about the discretionary compensation process? Okay. Anyone have any questions?
Is Nancy still here?
No.
One other thing, sorry, I should have added that some of the other schools, or as they weren't necessarily departments, schools talked about deadlines that were coming up, and that, in this school it was this, and they have till November 29th, and so I had nothing to add, and it certainly made me ask myself, well, what's the deal with here? And so I figured that we would follow up as far as through Librarians Assembly, through the steering, and ask some of these questions just to find out where they stand.
On the discretionary compensation,
Yeah,
on professional
compensation.
development grants, just resend out those deadlines to remind people that they are there.
Well, no, it was each of the schools sort of had their own deadline. And so I think the email that we received from Ed didn't state so much. It just said, we'll talk to supervisors. So I'm just curious, what is our own deadline?
I mean, I'd be happy to share what was sent to supervisors.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So anyone who supervises permanent staff received this email from Nancy. They received also a spreadsheet of a listing of their permanent staff who report to them with a year by year. The DCF has been around for 4 or 5 years now. A year by year, who on your staff has received DCF in the past. So we each got a spreadsheet. I will say, because I supervise people who supervise, I can also share that I only receive the people I directly supervise. So, so then I worked with the managers at College Library who also received their spreadsheets, and we had those conversations together. But it's they send their recommendations to me, I send my recommendations to Leslie. So the recommendations for DCF must work through the levels of supervision, and your AUL should have all of the recommendations no later than the end of the day on November 13th. That was Monday. So, you must have completed all of your midterm and yearly evaluations by December 15th in order to be considered for a DCF. If you've not completed your evaluations by that point, it does not affect your staff's ability to get a DCF, but it will affect yours. So these are also tied to evaluations, performance evaluations, completion. We, the GLS, have to complete the exercise by the end of January. So the internal goal is to have it done by the end of the calendar year, and the increase is effective January 1st. To the AULs, I assume the AULs are collecting all of them and looking at them this week, and so over the next few weeks, exec will be following up. The AULs will be looking at overall equity and market factors. However, if you believe there's an inequity amongst the people you supervise and you would like to include that in your percentage of recommendations, that is fine. So that's the overall thing. They asked us to submit a ranking, which reflects the priority order of the increases, a paragraph justifying the recommendation, type of request you're making. So you can make one on behalf of equity issue, you can make it on performance, retention, things like that. And then they point us to campus information about how those are defined. Some of this is duplicative to what I already said. We are not affected by incomplete prevention of sexual harassment and violence training because GLS was 100% compliant. The spreadsheet also includes the start date that the employee started in the general library system, so you can see how long they've been here. There are two funds. One is discretionary compensation fund, and that's around merit, performance, equity. And these increases are not a substitute for promotions or base adjustments based on change in job duties or job titles. And you are strongly encouraged to consider increases for employees in low wage categories. I am selectively pulling out information because there's a lot here. You may submit for 30 to 40% of your staff for a one-time performance bonus payment. So there's also a performance bonus fund. So two separate things. Discretionary compensation is an increase to the salary that's ongoing. Performance bonus is a one-time lump sum. And you could submit staff in each category. Staff are encouraged to consider qualified individuals who put extra time and effort into mentoring students and staff involved with campus climate issues or who put extra work into diversity and inclusion initiatives. Again, please consider exceptional performance by employees in low wage categories. Bonus, base increase. In each case, 30 to 40% of the staff could be put forward. It does not need to be the same. So you could put some, and you could put a person up in both categories. That help?
Thank you.
Right.
Here. Okay. So Ian, thank you for filling for my.
So fun fact, I just came to the ULC meeting, so you get 2 for today. At the meeting that was the October meeting, I did not attend, so I have the notes here, and I will kind of thumbnail this. So the big components to the October ULC meeting was getting a chance to, well, words. So we're talking about the campus open access policy, of which there is not a well-articulated one. We're also talking about open educational resources, of which there is not a well-articulated singular vision for campus. So these two things, of course, touch on each other and overlap. And when ULC, as a member of the, I think it's like a function of shared governance, kind of started to mobilize the efforts around a unified open access policy for campus and began taking that forward a year ago, there were some difficulties with how it was received with Faculty Senate. Things went a little off topic, things went sideways, and so the ULC is preparing to sort of realign and craft a better, more precise message and carry forward a new strategy around the formation of a campus open access policy. The folks who were at ULC to talk about these things were specifically Carrie Nelson and Ben Brooke Shank as well, as somebody who is thinking about open educational resources as the new curricular content librarian for UW-Madison. So a lot of what was going on there was those two people informing about their areas of expertise to the academic staff and faculty who represent on ULC as our stakeholder partners in how we carry forward the message of a campus open access policy. So that dominated the previous meeting. At the meeting that we just came from, the meeting had 2 major focuses. I should also say at the previous one, we're touring library to library, so the last meeting was at law, and we also had an opportunity to hear from law and them to represent some of their services and facility to the members of ULC. So this is going to be an ongoing thing where ULC is going library to library so that those libraries get a chance to directly represent their services and what they do to the faculty on ULC, the academic staff, university staff, and student staff. So today's meeting was focused on an update on the Vice Provost for Library Search and Screen, which was very brief. Kristen was there to talk with us, and I believe we have an update today as well, so I won't belabor that point. You're all going to get it like straight from the actual source very shortly. So the other component that we spent a lot of time on today was the library facilities master plan sharing information. So before I dig into this, I'd like to ask you, Carrie, if I may, is there a plan? Because I know that we are in this place where recommendations exist now, but there is undoubtedly a communications plan about how these recommendations are going to be to everybody. And I know that today's meeting was the absolute first tip of the big iceberg in that communications plan. So I feel it's very important that this not be lumped into a, how come we're hearing of this through somebody else, and nobody's told us about it. It just happens to be that I just came from the meeting, the first pinpoint in the entire communications plan. Would you care to say or tell us a little bit about what that communications plan looks like?
Presentation, Ed and I co-presented to ULC today. Ed will be presenting to the Leadership Council, so the deans and other vice provosts, vice chancellors, etc., on November 21st, I believe it is. We are in the process of updating the website to include some of this basic information.
And that would be the Facilities Master Planning Committee.
Facility
website.
Master Plan, there is a website, go.wisc.edu/library master plan. The big one is November 29th. It's being presented to the Design Review Board through A&M. So I don't think the actual recommendations and plan will be shared publicly before that one happens, before the Design Review Board, because that's sort of the
This stuff is all
stakeholders.
very theoretical and hasn't actually been stamped.
It hasn't officially been,
until
yes.
that late November meeting.
7th, we are still in the process of finalizing exact times and locations, but there will be forums that staff could attend on December 7th. There will be one that will be specifically focused on staff. Essentially the same presentation as the public forums, but spending a little more time on the staff space piece of it and on what happens to Memorial Library, to give staff who will probably have a greater interest in those questions time to ask those questions. The public forums, that'll be part of it, but there won't be concerted effort to spend a lot of time on that. And again, the goal is to have one of the public forums probably over the lunch hour, another one probably toward the end of the day. But until we have those rooms finalized, I will send an announcement about that as soon as it is. But we just, as of last night, confirmed December 7th. So that's why that hasn't been shared yet.
So I wanted to lay that down first so that everybody knows that there is a plan about how this information comes to library staff, and that what I know from ULC is, again, the absolute tip of the iceberg. And so to share that update, and I hope that I'm not messing anything up for everybody, but I think the important takeaway from the facilities master planning conversation is that the committee put forward, the Edward Anderson consultants put forward 3 different options. Those options are on the website. You should go review them so that you're familiar with option 3. They were very different visions of what facilities would look like over the course of the next 25 years and what we build towards. Again, very long term, and how they hook into campus master planning. The thing to know is that the second recommendation, so we have 1, 2, 3, that the Facilities Master Planning Committee has decided to recommend. And that is the one that's being carried forward and is being put before faculty, is being put before all the people that Carrie was just talking about, and the one that we'll be discussing further in those December meetings where that kind of comes out for staff. Facets of number 2, there's so darn much stuff in it that I don't think that it's valuable for me to try and break it down and parse it for all of you right now. To go to the site about the different 3 that were available, and to look especially at 2 and consider that as the direction that we're going, and formulate the questions that you have, because I'm not qualified to answer those questions. The discussion that sort of dominated what was going on there had a lot to do with the nature of print collections and where print collections exist in the facilities master plan carrying us forward the next 25 years. I think that it's fair to say that Senate representatives on ULC currently. Many of them are very concerned about the state of our print collections and our collection development strategies, especially as they see a dichotomy of print versus electronic. It is my hope that we can continue to remove the versus from that dynamic. Libraries are thinking strategically about print and electronic and what that means. But I will say that it looks like a lot of the initial faculty feedback and concern related to the facilities master planning is how they see the space for physical collections, which is lesser. And what the new focus on offsite storage going on. But I would also, as a caveat into that, say that the facilities master planning process is not about our collection planning process, that it's more taking into account the collection development strategies that the GLS is putting into place. So I would caution that this is the sort of thing that it's Doug's vision about how the collection development strategies are and should work for campus, and really how the facilities management plan, master plan is kind of responding to that plan. So I think that when we as a staff engage these two documents and processes, we want to be sure that we're thinking on the one hand of what Doug's strategic vision is on the sort of AUL level of how do we think about collections for campuses, and then how that hooks into this recommendation too. So that's my assessment of what's going on, and I hope that's useful, and if people have questions, I can try to answer them. But again, I don't want to try and represent that I have any great expertise of what's actually contained in the plan or a person who could speak to it.
Okay, so now we've got Peggy to come up with a quick.
All right, I just want to talk about the budget real quick. Right now, we currently have $1,374.18 in the credit union in our account. Remember, we talked about what we projected we were going to spend for this year. We projected we were going to spend $1,105. In our budget for this year, we have $1,080. So far, we've spent $49.98 for eTalk Run. For those of you that can add quickly in your head, that doesn't add up quite right. That's because somebody else paid their dues for the year, and that came in. So for the next coming budget, we have $275.38 to spend, and that is up from my last projection, and that again is because a couple of people have paid their dues. And so what I really want to say is, remember, you can pay your dues right now. Right? You can pay any time. So we're on budget, everything's going well, so thanks.
To us.
So just wanted to, as the person who's spending all of your money, talk about some of the things that are upcoming, including this Friday. So please come for bagels to our eTalk Run on 8:30 to 9:30. As you can see, we have some interesting events scheduled. There's going to be a speaker from the Writing Center talking about perfecting our email. Kalani Adolfo is going to be talking about structures of whiteness, and then Jessie Henderson from UWDCC is going to be discussing her trip to Norway this past summer. Also, we have a book sharing scheduled for December 13th. If you've read like one good book this year, please send Karen Dunn, wave your hand, Karen. People who are interested in reading and like to share titles, and you can usually come away with a whole list of things to read for the coming year and potentially holiday gift ideas. So I feel please mark your calendars for December
13th. Beth and I are the programming committee at the moment, and we are really looking for someone to join us, especially as we come to planning the high tea and recognition ceremony. We have booked the date, so I would say also mark your calendars. April 17th is a Tuesday from 3 to 5. We'll be again in Lathrop Hall. And to start again our library lunches in the new year, in the spring semester. Or if you have any other ideas for programming or things that we can do, please contact either Beth or myself. Any questions about programming? Anything, just let us know. Thanks.
Thanks, Norma. So I know Karen also is working on a form to grab those titles, right?
I'm sorry.
You're working on a form to grab the titles
Yes,
for
yes.
the.
And what I'll share that with him once when I finish. I have just a little web form that will just pop into the spreadsheet for the titles too.
So there will be an email. There'll be an email coming out to get those titles. Just want to get that. Okay. So and Pamela talking about needing someone else on the programming committee. We did have someone leave Library Assembly Steering Committee, and Katie has been sending out emails about that, and we haven't had anyone self-nominate. So please email me or the steering committee, or look for that email from Katie if it's something that the new member would work with Pamela on programming and be a backup for Amy for casting. So send me an email or look for that email from Katie if you're interested. Okay, so I see Kristen is here and Carol is here, and I think there are some people on the steering committee I'm not familiar with. Do people want to just stay in their seats and have a discussion, or with that? So maybe if Kristen and Carol and members of the steering committee or the search committee for the vice provost could maybe stand up and just introduce themselves so we can. You want to?
Sure, I have a short speech. If
Okay.
that's okay.
Then I will let you.
Thank you. Oh, there's the camera. Thank you. So hi, everybody. My name is Kristen Eschenfelder. I'm on the faculty of the Information School. I'm currently chair. So I've been on this campus for, I think, 18 years now. Does that sound right, Deb? Yeah. For those of you who don't know me, I teach in the area of management, so I like to walk out a lot with ebooks and e-journal sorts of things. So that's kind of my greatest area of interest with regards to kind of contemporary academic librarianship. But I'm here today as my role of the chair of the search committee for the vice provost for library search with Carol. And I just wanted to come, Carol and I wanted to come so that you knew who we were, to say hi, and to let you know that we look forward to having a very inclusive process. Definitely want to hear from this community about your concerns regarding the search and also your hopes and aspirations for the search. And we welcome opportunities to collaborate in ensuring in the search process as much as is allowable of the rules and laws set up around searches. But so I may be coming back and talking with you more later on, or talking with individual people. But I am, as chair, I'm available at any point during the search process. So if you ever have a question or concern, you can email me and I will respond to you. Just keep in mind there's certain things I can't do because of the rules of the search, especially with regard to the content of people who apply. So a couple of things I wanted to tell you about. I had heard that there was some concerns regarding the use of the search firm and how that was different from the last vice provost for libraries research. I was also on that search committee. And I can tell you if it is very commonly done. I see it as a complete positive that we are using a search firm this time. So those of you who are not familiar with search firms, what their main goal is to get good people to apply. That is their job, is to get people to apply, and the job ends there. So they do not evaluate in any way. that job falls to the search committee. But when you're on a search committee that doesn't use a search firm and it becomes part of the search committee's job to actually get people to apply, it's like, so you should see it as a positive that the provost is investing more in this search, trying to get more and better candidates. And use of a search firm for vice provosts and deans of libraries is very common. I get queries from these search firms all the time asking for recommendations of candidates for jobs that are opening, or just wanting to hear, do I know this person, et cetera, et cetera. So it's incredibly common. Everyone will see it as a positive sign that Wisconsin is taking this search very seriously. Questions about the search firm. Carol's had a lot of experience with them before and could tell you more about them if people were interested.
And we're going to be, they're coming to town, the 2 consultants who are working with us on this search. They're going to be doing a site visit on December 4th and 5th, and getting to know the terrain so that they're able to really represent the library system here when they're talking to candidates. We're going to be holding a public listening session at 1 o'clock on December 5th in Memorial Union. We'll also be sending out a note to you all about this, but we would love for you to stop by and meet them in person and answer questions about the process.
Really helpful if you could come to that public listening session is one of their jobs is to tell stories to potential applicants. So if you have things that are cool that you think they should know about because they could use it to brag to make the job seem more attractive, that would be a helpful thing to share with them. Of course, they also want to know about challenges too, and the types of challenges the person who takes the job will get. And so that is also relevant.
So has the search firm, do they specialize in a certain kind of, like, have they done a lot of library directors?
Great question. Carol.
They have a pretty broad portfolio when it comes to higher education, and they did the search for our provost and for the dean of the business school, and I remember vice chancellor, one of the vice chancellor searches that we did recently, they staffed, so 3 in very recent years. But when we choose a search firm, we have a list of approved vendors who have contracts with PW System. We look through that list to see what their experience is in whatever search that we're doing. So they do have significant experience doing library searches, particularly the 2 consultants who are working on this. They are like librarian specialists. But at the same time, they have a really good understanding of our culture, which can be a frustration sometimes for search firms. But this firm really, really gets and respects shared government. So I'm always happy when I get to work with them.
So they've done 3 searches on this campus?
They've done more than 3 searches, but just recently they've done 3.
Yeah.
So I'll figure out, I'm going to say this concisely and well, and take it in the context of you saying there will be information that you can't share at various points because of the stipulations of how it works. I think that one of the things that in that meeting when we were learning about how the process was going to go forward, one of the things that struck us, and people can correct me if I overgeneralize or speak for you in error, the search firm was going to be used, but more the communication process of how we learned that the search firm was going to be used, and that there's some burdens about how information is communicated in a variety of ways. So, like the idea that 2 or 3 people in the room know that the search firm is going to be employed and everybody else doesn't, and it's one of these who has connections to the information, who doesn't have connections to the information. So I would really love to know more about the points in time when you think you'll be able to communicate information, what's going on with the search, what that information might look like. Does it go to different people and stakeholders first? That sort of thing. So we'll understand a little bit more about what we can expect to be passed.
Sure. And I'll attempt to answer, but Carol, please jump in if I forget schedule more recently than me. So first, Ian, I hear you. And I know there was I think everyone was a little frustrated by how long it took to get the representatives from the governance groups lined up. And it took a long time. And so that was the cause of some of the delay. It's just, you know, invitations were sent out, people had to be queried, people had to agree and get back, all of those things. So I appreciate your frustration with the time lag there. So there are 5 librarians on the search committee now. So I think you have the complete list now. So there's quite a healthy portion of the search committee. In terms of timing, everyone who is, I guess some of the most important things to know are everyone who applies is confidential until they are invited to campus as a finalist. So really we can't tell you anything about who applied, how many people applied, any of that stuff until we get to the finalist stage, and then it'll go up on a website and everyone will know. So that is really important to understand. But that's guaranteed confidentiality for the people who are applying, and it's important that we protect them so that we can get the best possible candidates and the widest pool of candidates to apply. Other points of input could be that I know in the past, for the last Vice Provost for Library Search, this group had suggested questions that could be used by the search committee in its screening of preliminary candidates. Because what will happen is everyone will apply. We think that January?
Like the 3rd week.
Yeah, mid-January-ish.
Do you want to bring it up?
Oh yeah, if you have it. And then the committee will be reviewing all of those applications and deciding who to do the kind of short interviews with. And so at that point, I think it could be very helpful to have suggested questions from this committee about things to consider, given that to a great extent limited by what's in the PBL. We have to evaluate people based on the criteria that are in the PBL. I think a second area where there could be even more chance for input would be when the short interviews are done. And those are private, because those are still confidential. But I think there's the possibility there where this committee, that the search committee could private interviews, as long as you have to understand we have to use them fairly. So we have to ask everybody the same thing. But it would be very helpful to have this committee. And then, of course, when the folks are invited to campus and they're public, there will be a lot more freedom because people will be able to go to the individual talks and ask the questions themselves. Did I miss anything there, Carol? In terms of big steps?
We are going to be really limited with what we're able to say. Like, we won't even give exact dates on when the confidential interviews are happening, because if you all know that, and all of a sudden we notice a lot of my colleagues from out of town coming into town, that's confidential.
Who's going to hang out at the airport and look to see who comes down the escalator?
Right. So in general, the committee's going to be pretty quiet until it's time to announce the finalist campus. If you do have a pressing question or there's something that you want to bring to the committee's attention, we ask that you do that through Kristen and not just corner other people around the committee, like in the bathroom or through confession or whatever, because they know that Kristen is supposed to be the person who's talking to everyone. She's the committee's spokesperson. So try not to put your other colleagues on the spot by asking them for information. And Kristen, to the extent that she can, will share information with you. But they are pretty limited with what they're going to be able to say.
I was just asking about ways we can get information to you. So these are areas that we had identified as being ways that librarians can get information to you. Mesh with, and yeah, so this is also the questions that you had mentioned.
Yep. So this is a great one to bring up. So when the search and screen committee is here, and we have the public forum on the afternoon of the 5th, 1 o'clock.
Yep.
This would be a great time to provide that information, because remember, it's a search and screen committee that's doing the recruiting, where if you want to tell them about, ooh, a cool new thing that's going on, or organizational information, or highlight library spaces, give it to them. They are the recruiters, they're the braggers, they're the ones that want to tell the cool stories to get the best candidates. The search committee is more straight evaluative.
That point was more so, or in addition, spaces and things to highlight during campus visits. So in terms of working with you to say, hey, you know what, you can have this here in this library space or this library space, or during the campus type tours or whatever.
What do you think?
What about the ULC is going through the different libraries, at the search and screen going to different libraries and highlight library spaces. So the search and screen committee are familiar with library spaces as well.
Okay, so let me clarify. When the finalists come to town, actually, they don't hang out with the search and screen committee that much. This little known fact, or maybe not so little known, guess who makes the final decision about who to hire? Not the search and screen committee, the provost. So actually the provost job sort of takes over, you know, how exactly those visits are going to occur. I'll be there as the representative of the committee. Other committee members might be there, but the committee does not run those visits. So Carol, if people wanted to suggest not to miss it during visits, what would be the best way for them to do
I'm
that?
the staff person who will organize all of that. So I am the person you should send that to. I'm really happy to get suggestions from people because I don't know the world as well as you do. And so by all means, if you have ideas about spaces, about stakeholder groups that should be included, these typically happen, it's like a full day of meetings. So the candidates will come in the day before, they'll have a dinner with probably the chair of the search committee and maybe, I don't know, donors, you know, a very small dinner that's more about recruitment, getting them excited. And then the next day, they'll have a series of meetings with different stakeholders on campus. So knowing who those groups should be and who should be in like smaller individual meetings as opposed to only being invited to the public forum, like that's all really great information to have. And we would expect those visits to take place in early April.
Okay, and so Carol doesn't get bombarded with emails. We have Librarians Assembly is starting an ad hoc committee to call this information so that we can get it to Carol.
That would be great.
So
let me tell you who we sort of have on the list. Kind of, not that this is a final list, but I guess it's sort of our working list. So this group we know is a governance group. The University Library Committee we know is a governance group. The UALs, of course. The management team within Memorial, so HR budget, those sorts of things. And then we know other, you know, long-term, long-standing campus library directors. So that's kind of the rough list I had in my head.
There's also, they'll need to have meetings with campus level administrators. They'll be part of the provost executive group, so you would have a session for them to meet with, you know, their future peers. Usually a lunch with some external stakeholders, people from different places like that, the VP might engage with for fundraising or other things like that. So there's a public, like, campus component to it too. Like that every one day so that you don't put them through it's pretty exhausting.
But that was sort of the list I had in my head. So if I'm missing things, let me know via the calling process. That would be great to have it in a.
And just also add, the PBL is up right now, and there's going to be an announcement in Inside UW tomorrow. Even though we have a search firm, we really welcome your nominations for candidates. There is to the search account, which Kristen and the committee will see those emails. So anyone who you want to nominate, we will follow up with an invitation.
And it's very discreet. That's another one of the benefits of working with a search firm is that the search firm can communicate with people in a much more discreet way than a more official communication. So, yes, question?
You mentioned just now, I think that you said April would be when the finals would come.
April-ish.
So when would the person be expected to start?
Oh, good question.
So that's going to be negotiable. We know that Ed is done at the end of the semester. Is that right?
Yeah, it's like May 31st or something.
There could end up being a little bit of a gap in there because these are high-level positions and asking somebody just to drop everything and come out. It's going to be difficult. A lot of things that they need to wrap up where they're at. They will have a sense from the time that they interview of what we're hoping their start date would be, so hopefully they'll be taking that into consideration going forward while they're waiting to hear more from us. But there could be a little bit of a lag in there.
So number C, which is a great suggestion, I would love this to be part of what you sent me, and I could take this to the search committee. But we wouldn't use it again until we have those short interviews. But I'd love to have your suggestions. D, creating a rubric for library staff to evaluate candidates. I feel like that's you.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, okay. That's not us. From library staff. How is it done? Let's think about how was it done last time with the public forums.
I can talk about how we do that. So we will have, early on in the search when we work with the firm, we don't do our own university search webpage, but when we get close to the campus visits, we will set up a website that you'll all have a link to. And on that, we will post videos of everybody's presentations. We'll post the candidates' CVs so that you can look at those, and we'll have a schedule for the presentations. And anybody who participates either in those or if you're invited to the small stakeholder meeting, we have a call track survey that we set up with some very open-ended questions about the candidates, and my office compiles those and shares them with the provost. I can tell you that she reads every single bit of feedback. She doesn't enter into negotiations until she has all of that from campus, and she really listens to what people are saying. And like in the business team search that we just did, there were 80 pages of feedback. She read it all and took it into account. So it's not just a rubber stamp or just this little thing that we go through. She really, really wants your feedback on the candidates.
Can we, are there some search and screen committee members here?
Yes.
Can we just some faces?
Want to stay?
Sure. Carrie Cruz.
I'm Laura Schmidt. I was appointed by ASM.
And I'm the university staff member on the committee.
Then there's Leslie.
And Paloma.
And Paloma.
From the library.
Another different question. So this clearly comes out of the presentation you just gave in ULC.
Yeah.
There's an element of it that I feel like will become scuttlebutt, and it might be better to talk about it directly here than to let it do that.
Sure.
And that's the degree conversation.
Yes, let's talk about the
Could you-
PDL.
I'll just let you.
Okay, rewind the speech. Okay, so we did want to talk about the PDL. So the search committee, we met once, and what we did was we talked about the PDL. Several suggestions or edits were made that I want to tell you about. So one suggestion that was made was some folks felt that the PBL is in its original form didn't sort of acknowledge the importance of print collections to various constituencies on campus. And so language was inserted to do so. It's somewhere up there. Yeah, it's basically like
down.
print and electronic collections. We put in print and. So not that exciting an edit, but I just wanted to let you know, someone brought it up as a concern. We discussed it. We edited it. So the other major point of discussion was how to, what kind of relationship to require between the candidates and a accredited MLS degree or MLIS degree. And this was an extensive and extremely interesting discussion where all of the non-librarians in the room learned a lot about the politics of library land. So, you know, on one side of the debate, you had folks who felt, you know, this is an ARL institution. We need to have all the candidates should have the required accredited MLS degree. On the other side of the debate, I would say there were someone who brought out the fact that, well, from a diversity perspective, perhaps not having such a tight coupling between candidates and the MLS degree might increase the diversity of the field. In particular, someone noted, what about internationalism? If we wanted to recruit folks from Europe or Latin America, having a ALA accredited degree would be too narrow because those folks are in fact not accredited by ALA. They have different accreditation mechanisms, which I'm happy to talk about at length with anyone who wants to know about them sometime later. That's about is accreditation. And then someone else also pointed out that we know that in our profession, the libraries have started hiring folks who do not have MLS degrees and have been doing so for some time. And that some of those people, say hired 10, 15 years ago, may have in fact worked their way up through academic library management, where they hold a fairly senior position now, where based on their prior experience working in academic libraries, they might in fact be strong candidates. And if one looks at all of the heads of ARL libraries right now, they in fact don't all have accredited MLS degrees. So it is possible, there's probably not a huge number of them out there, but it is possible that there could be a very strong candidate with a lot of years of academic library experience who doesn't have the accredited MLS degree. And so that went back to the argument the argument there was we need to have as broad a pool as possible. We don't want to accidentally exclude someone who in fact might be really good but is missing this one. So after much debate, the committee came up with kind of compromise language, which is
At the top.
MLS from an ALA accredited institution or commensurate degree and experience is required. So what we wanted to say there was, you know, you've got to have tons of experience working in a research academic library environment. You're not going to be in consideration for this, but it is possible that you could not have an accredited MLS and still have that experience, or it's possible that you might have a degree from a different country that isn't ALA accredited and also have the experience. So that was the compromise language. This to end the debate. So continue debate amongst yourselves.
Just to add that I think the probability of hiring somebody who doesn't have an MLS is probably pretty small. That language is in there to take into account like the exception rather than the rule, but it's just really sort of a best practice, and you who have done your own searches know probably you don't want to close the door unnecessarily because we never know what kind of candidates you're going to have. And once it's a requirement in the PBL, then we wouldn't have any flexibility on considering people
at all. Yeah.
Outside of that.
We're just about at time. Again, I just want to bring up that Todd and I are putting together an ad hoc committee for people who would like to gather this information, get information to Kristen and Carol and the search and screen. So if this is a committee you're interested in being on, please email me. Everyone should have my email address. That's where the information for this meeting came from. And we really would like to get university staff on the ad hoc committee as well, get representation. So I'd like to thank Kristen and Carol and search and screen members for coming today. We have the room for another half an hour, so if people do have a few questions, you're able to stick around for a little bit, that would be great. I'm very excited just to see that there's the experience.
I mean, I don't, if there was any kind of paranoia that the not requiring the MLS was part of some move to, hire some like ex-IBM or Target exec to come run your library. No, that is not the case. Of course, they need to have substantial, research, academic library experience.
But I don't think that's actually a course anymore, so I really appreciate it being articulated loud.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at all of the other requirements that are in the PBL, those folks would be, that sort of person would be excluded because of those things. Anyhow.
Well, now, you were saying that the provost has the privilege of making the last, final decision, right? I assume then that this parallels essentially what we have in the GLS, which is the director, possesses the right and privilege to making the final decision too. And that I really don't know about provost search, so I'm expressing my ignorance here, but so perhaps there's a manual, there is in the GLS. Usually the chair of the committee have a discussion with the director about the 3 top candidates, or to have a discussion with the full list of people who applied to make a recommendation. Do you know how that is done at the provost level?
I'm going to refer that one to Carol.
So, the provost does not participate in any kind of evaluation of candidates, nor will she see the full list of candidates. She is only going to interact with the finalists that the committee presents to her. So, I guess technically there could be a case where the provost sees a list and says, I'm not happy with anyone in this pool, and I think we need to go back to the pool and consider other candidates or extend the search. That hasn't happened since I've been doing this. I'm in my 5th year now, but it's a possibility. But this is very much a shared governance process where it is faculty, staff, and students who are making this decision, evaluating all of the candidates, and the provost, she comes to the first meeting to charge the committee and then steps completely out of the process until they're done and ready to present.
Carol, can you give a bit more detail about how the committee's presentation of the final 3-ish candidates, what is that presentation consist of?
So, in advancing candidates throughout the search, there's increasingly higher vote thresholds. So, and the committee decides what that's going to be, but typically it's if you're going to invite people to campus for that first round of interviews, and that's typically 8 to 12 people that you're going to bring in. That's a simple majority. And then to get to the next stage, which would be to have your references checked, that is 2/3, and then to be a finalist, it becomes 3/4. So by the time the committee has winnowed all of that down, there's usually pretty broad consensus about who this finalist should be, but there's not always complete agreement. So if you're that one person who really wasn't supporting, this is the opportunity to talk to the provost face to face about any reservations that you might have. It's also her opportunity to ask the committee for more information about why they advanced those candidates, because as I said, she will have been completely out of the process. So we can give her additional information about the candidates at that point.
Okay, so I just want to add, because you're doing a parallel to how we do our hiring here, there's a really key distinction in this process, and that the search committee is only involved through that first round of interviews. So if you think of it for our process, it'd be like the committee does the phone interviews and then determines who to bring to campus and then stops. Right, so that is a very key distinction. So the committee, so in this case, it's not phone interviews, it's confidential on-campus interviews. So the first round of candidates will actually come to campus and meet with the committee, and nobody will know. So, right, yes. And then the committee does all of this discussion and recommendation and meeting with the provost and hands off sort of like, this is our recommendation for who to bring to campus for the public interview.
And that's like 3 people.
That's like 3 people. And then the search committee is actually done. So the public finalist interviews, those are when they meet the stakeholder groups and, are publicly on campus. The committee is no longer involved at that point.
So
that's a completely different way of managing it than how we do ours.
And that's when feedback to the provost becomes really
Correct.
important.
So feedback to the provost, the committee will no longer be giving feedback to the provost about the finalists. You all will be individuals. Yes, we could as individuals, but not as a committee.
So then what's the
April is the public on campus.
The finalist part.
Yeah.
So in fact, the search committee will be done.
Yeah.
Long, potentially by April. Okay.
Sue,
are you relying on any phone interviews at any stage, or is that the search firms?
We're not doing phone interviews. We're doing these short, very short visits, which it's the first I've ever done them. So I'm intrigued to see how it'll go.
My real question is about the word significant experience.
Yeah.
Under required, and I'm wondering if you have, significant seems like a vague word. Is there something less vague behind that?
No.
In terms of
No, there wasn't. I can't say that there was any debate or concern about that raised by the committee, and it wasn't seen as particularly strategic, you know.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of an accidental use versus minimum X 10 years or something like that. Yeah. But that would be, you know, something that the committee could suggest, that this body could suggest to the committee to consider in the short interviews. What is significant? What do you think would be important? And I'm assuming there's not an agreement. So I know you guys don't agree with each other. So please send me the range of the debate of what counts as significant.
The left-hand side says minimum number of years, but there is no minimum number stated. So what happened?
Well, the reason it says minimum number of years is that's just that's part of the new trends template, like that appears no matter what. We decided not to put a number like 10 or something on for the same reason that we have the ML. And I say we, but I'm only there to facilitate. I do not have a decision role in this process. But putting an actual number on it is the same thing. If you say 10 years and you get somebody with 9.5 years, really, really terrific, you can't fire them because we've already locked them out.
So it's not going to be why you use capitals.
Because it's
Say it on that left-hand side.
you can't. It's the template.
It's the web.
I know, but it seems confusing.
I think the whole trends thing, like I said,
Does anyone like trends?
all thing that doesn't really work for everyone.
Yeah, but it would be helpful, I think it would be super helpful to have some thoughts, some collated thoughts about significant experience of, not including numbers, but yeah, what would you want to see? Like what sort of tasks or accomplishments? That would be very helpful. That might imply having been someplace a certain number of years.
You had mentioned earlier that there were certain stakeholders from the faculty that were concerned that we weren't emphasizing a physical collection.
Just the PBL, not you.
You said that it was put into the PBL. I haven't seen that.
It's up. Let's see.
I'm trying to find it.
It's really short.
Sure, otherwise
For paper.
Print.
Oh, I have to go to the full one?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just found it.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's works closely with library staff. I did it first and the consolidation.
Something about expertise or experience with print and electronic collection management.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, under professional development.
Yeah. There's several faculty from history who I think are particularly tuned because they use print for doing their research.
There are several subject areas on campus that are heavily dependent on print. We're not just like engineering, that's practically all digital.
Exactly.
Or medicine. A lot of the humanities, art.
Yep. Oh, art definitely, yeah.
So I think making sure that they have an understanding that we're not really heavily reliant upon digital to keep in mind collection is just as important.
Yep.
And it was the print collection that got this university where it is today. Digital has only been coming in the last 5 or 10 years. We didn't get where we are on the strength of our digital collection. We got where we are on the strength of our physical collection.
I've heard the members of the search committee give the exact same speech. So you can rest assured to know that there are strong print advocates on that committee.
We do have a program coming in to the room.
Yeah.
Wrap up, like 5 more minutes.
Steve?
So this sort of might be a tricky one, given that sort of confidentiality, what's there. But, you know, personally, I want like the search to be successful. I want it to sort of go well. But part of that also involves what happens after someone fires. Sort of like us, the people who are in this unit, sort of really buy into it. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we can learn about all of the input that you're getting beyond, so like, are there decisions and feedback that you're getting from non-library stakeholders, such as faculty, such as researchers on campus? Can we learn about that? Sort of have just a little bit more insight into, we got this feedback, and that played a role in the decision, and that's why maybe it was at odds with some of the feedback that could have come from the library side.
That's an interesting question. So in the first round of reviewing applications, it's totally based on the PBL. It's hiring. It's pretty strict. So whatever kind of rubric we develop will be straight from the PBL. So there it is. You see it. There is no other input beyond the PBL. So that would be a good question. If we're asking them to suggest questions that could be used by the search committee.
We could definitely they would love to have feedback on questions we should be asking. That's really helpful. The committee is not going to be able to share back information about what went on in their deliberations, or what kind of feedback we were hearing from other people, because that's all part of the confidential aspect of searches. So
yeah, I mean, that's sort of what I'm getting at. It's like, we're one tribe on this campus.
Yeah.
And we've got a very specific set of vantage points. And I'm just wondering, and it's always helpful if I know that, if I know you're getting this kind of feedback, to factor X into your decision making about a candidate pool, that helps to sort of understand why.
Would it be possible to produce a list of people who we asked for suggestions from? We're not saying if they gave us suggestions, what the suggestions were.
I think it would be okay to say,
like
the
committee.
But we're also we're guaranteeing all of those people confidentiality.
Yeah.
So we don't want to say,
right. If somebody randomly emails me a concern, I can't say, hey, Steve, so-and-so, email me.
Could I just posit something that might work to help us?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a really good, that we all want to have that buy-in and support of the candidate, whoever is selected. That we talked about how this group might put forward questions that represent some of our issues and interests as we figure out what those are internally. That maybe the questions themselves have to be confidential. We don't need to know necessarily the answers to the questions, but if researchers are saying, this question is important to us, and faculty are saying, this question is important to us, it might help us understand the priorities of different stakeholders, even if we don't get to see the actual answers.
Yeah, that's sort of
Yeah, in the past, we have never done that before. I think that we would need to sit down as a committee and really think about that question. I don't want to just answer off the cuff here, but I would say that if you as a community have questions that you think are really important to ask, the time to do that is during the finalist stage, when you get to have one-on-one time with them, and then it's all transparent to the public, and there's a lot less ambiguity than what's going on during the first round of interviews.
So I also just say, I think whatever message the provost sends about the decision will probably convey the strengths or the things that certainly not necessarily address the feedback and some of the differences, but I would think that would be important in that messaging.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. RDS Brown Bag is next. Stay. Keep updated. I'm staying.